Hi, my name is Shawn Shaftner and I'm a teaching artist, and this is Literacy Through Art with Arts for All. In this series, we are learning to write our own stories using a classic fairy tale as our inspiration. This is video 1 of 5, our introduction to the topic. Video 1!
Artists express their feelings.
Artists create things to express their feelings and ideas. Artist, how are you feeling today? It's helpful to check in with our heart and notice how we're feeling. Let's listen to the feelings in our heart and take a breath together.
In, out.
Did you find a word for your feeling? Let's express that feeling with a sound and a gesture. For example, I'm feeling joyous, so I'm going to make this sound and gesture. Woohoo! Great. Now, what sound and gesture might express your feeling? Thanks for expressing yourself, artist.
Let's hear a story.
Do you like stories? I love stories. I like hearing them at bedtime, seeing them at the movies, reading them from the newspaper. Where do you get your stories? Stories often feel very real to us, even when they're made up. Can I tell you a secret? A person just like you made that story. That's right. Whatever kind of story it is, whether it was a news story or even a movie based on a real story that happened, one person or a few people just like you wrote it down. They drafted and revised to make that article or movie or book or YouTube or podcast or whatever. You are a very creative artist, and you can write stories. I'm going to show you 3 simple tools to help you do just that. But first, let's hear a story. This story is a fairy tale. Do you know any fairy tales? Yeah, maybe you know Little Red Riding Hood, or The 3 Little Pigs, or Goldilocks and the 3 Bears, or Jack and the Beanstalk. There are lots of different fairy tales from all over the world, wherever and whenever there have been people. Today, we'll hear a shortened version of the fairy tale Cendrillon. You might not have heard that name before, but I bet you know this story. Like all stories, it was written by a creative artist, just like you. The author is named Charles Perrault, and he was a very famous writer when this story came out in 1697. The version we're about to hear is based on a translation by Soren Filipsky. Here we go. Curtain up!
There was once a noble man whose wife had died. He remarried, taking a second wife who was as stuck-up and proud as any in the world. She brought with her 2 daughters who shared the same bad character. Now the husband also had a young daughter, but she was full of unmatched gentleness and kindness. As soon as the wedding was over, the stepmother forced the young child to work, making her wash the dishes, clean the tables, and clean the bedrooms. Whenever she had finished her work, she would go to the corner of the fireplace and sit in the ashes and cinders, and so she came to be called Cendrillon, or Cinderella. But even with her filthy clothes, Cinderella was easily 100 times more beautiful than her sisters. It happened one day that the king's son was giving a ball, and invited the 2 sisters. When the happy day arrived at last, they departed, and Cinderella began to weep. Her godmother, who was a fairy, saw her all in tears, and said, "You would like to go to the ball, wouldn't you?" "Oh, yes," said Cinderella, sobbing. Her godmother said, "Go into the garden and bring me a pumpkin." Cinderella had no idea how a pumpkin could help her go to the ball, but went at once. Her godmother scooped out the pumpkin's insides. Then she struck it with her wand, and the pumpkin was instantly changed into a fine coach for Cinderella to ride. Then she took a look in her mousetrap, gave it a knock with her wand, and the mice were immediately turned into a team of 6 horses. Then the fairy picked out a rat and changed him into a plump coach driver. "Do I have to go like this, in my awful rags?" asked Cinderella. Her godmother instantly turned her rags into cloth of gold and silver, all decked out in jewels. Then she gave her a pair of glass slippers, the loveliest in the world. Her godmother ordered her not to stay out past midnight, warning that if she remained at the ball for an instant more, her coach would turn back to a pumpkin, her horses to mice, and her beautiful clothes would take back their original form. She promised her godmother, then she drove away. At the ball, the king's son danced only with Cinderella. The young prince ate nothing all night. He was so intent in gazing on her. She sat down with her sisters and gave them some of the oranges and lemons that the prince had given her, which amazed them, coming from a stranger. All of this was so very exciting for the young woman that she forgot her godmother's advice. When she heard the first stroke of midnight, she got up and fled, and she dropped one of her glass slippers, which the prince picked up with great care. Cinderella arrived home out of breath. Nothing remained of her magnificent attire but one little slipper. When the two sisters returned from the ball, they told her of a fine lady who enchanted the prince, then ran away and dropped one of her little glass slippers. A few days later, the king's son had it proclaimed that he would marry the woman whose foot could fit the slipper. When they brought in the two sisters, they did all they could to force their foot into the slipper, but could not succeed. The gentleman who was trying the slipper on the girls declared it only fair for Cinderella to try, since he had orders to test every girl. Cinderella sat down and found that the slipper fit perfectly. The two sisters were astonished, but even more so when Cinderella drew from her pocket the other little slipper and put it on her other foot. Just then her godmother appeared, and Cinderella's clothes became even more beautiful than they had ever been before. A few days later, the young prince married her, and Cinderella, who was as good as she was beautiful, gave her two sisters a place to stay at the palace, and married them that day to two great lords of the court.
Curtain down. What did you notice about this story? Did it remind you of another story? Maybe Cinderella? It turns out people have been telling this story for a really long time. Thousands of years, in fact. Cinderella is what we call her in English, but her story has been told in many different languages all over the world. And in our next videos, we're going to learn more about some of those Cinderella stories. Here's the big secret. Each one of them was written by a creative artist, just like you. And by the end of this series, you'll make your own Cinderella tale. You only need a few ingredients to make a fairy tale, or any other story for that matter.
3 building blocks of a story.
In the beginning of your story, you want to help your audience to see where and when your story takes place. In other words, setting, where and when is the setting. This call helps me remember that the where and when of a story is called the setting. Let's try it again. Do it with me. setting, where and when is the setting. What might be the setting of a fairy tale? In other words, where or when might a fairy tale take place? Often we hear that a fairy tale happened once upon a time in a far-off kingdom. Or others might be set one dark night in the woods, or one summer morning in a tiny village. Remembering the story we heard today, what was the setting of Cendrillon? Where? In France. In Cendrillon's father and stepmother's house, and at a royal ball. And when? Well, we don't know exactly, but we might say it was when her father and stepmother remarried, or just a long time ago. Our setting can apply to any story, even real life. Like, what's your current setting? I am in my bedroom. That's my where, and it's springtime in the afternoon. That is my when. Now that we know our story's setting, our audience wants to know, who's that? C-H-A-R-A-C-T-E-R, character. That's right. When we ask for the characters in our story, we're asking, do it with me, who's that? C-H-A-R-A-C-T-E-R, character. What are some of the characters we might find in fairy tales? In a fairy tale, we might meet characters like talking animals, princes and princesses, giants or elves or other magical beings. And who were some of the characters in our story, Cendrillon? We met Cendrillon, her stepmother, stepsisters, there was a fairy godmother and a prince, and lots of people at the royal ball. Character can apply to any story, even real life. Who are the characters present in your setting right now? I am home with my partner. Maybe your family or friends are nearby too. Now we know where and when and who, but we want to find out what happens. P-L-O-T, plot, 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 plot. Like, we're in a brick house on a summer's day, that's our setting, and there are 3 little pigs and a hungry wolf, our characters. Are they playing house? Are they doing jumping jacks? Are they giving each other gifts? I gotta know. What happens? P-L-O-T, plot, 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 plot. That's right. The plot is the action of our story. It tells us how the pigs built their house and how the hungry wolf tried to huff and puff and blow them down. Another way to explain our plot is through conflict. Do you know that word? It means 2 parties who want different things. The pigs want to live safely inside their nice house, but the wolf wants to eat them. It's hard to have both of these things, so we have a conflict. A good story is all about what the characters do to get what they want, and the obstacles or challenges that they have to overcome. In other words, what do the pigs do to keep themselves safe? And what does the wolf do to try and have them for dinner? Let's use the example from our story. What is the plot of Cendrillon, or the main conflict? We can often express the plot with a formula like this. Character wants X, but Y, so they Z. In other words, Cendrillon wants to go to the ball, but her stepmother and sisters say she can't, so she gets help from her fairy godmother. Plot can apply to any story, even real life, though most of the time our conflicts are pretty small and they don't make for super interesting stories. What's been the plot of your day so far? Is there something you wanted today? Was there any obstacle that stood in your way? And what did you do to get it? Not so much has happened in my day, but there was one small conflict. I wanted to have oatmeal for breakfast, but my partner ate the last bowl, so I had pizza instead. I hope that your conflict also had a happy ending.
Try this at home.
Today we heard the story of Cendrillon by Charles Perrault and learned the 3 basic building blocks of any story. What were they again? Let's help ourselves out by remembering our call. First, we want to know the setting, where and when is the setting. Then we want to know who's that, CHARACTER, character. And finally, what happens? P-L-O-T, plot, 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 plot. All right, nice job. You are a very creative artist, and you can write stories. Listen closely to the stories you hear or read over the next few days. See if you can identify the settings, character, and plot in each one. These same tools can be used to tell a story through drawing. You might find a piece of paper, even the back of some junk mail, and sketch a drawing that shows the setting, character, and plot. What details can you include to help the viewer see where and when the drawing is set, who the characters might be, and what's happening, or what they want, the obstacles in their way, and what they do to get it?
Time to say goodbye.
Thank you so much for joining me. Let's give ourselves a round of applause. Woo! Wishing you a great day and see you soon. From all of us at Arts for All.
See you later.
Woohoo!
It was really
Yay!
fun.
I really
Thanks for
enjoyed
coming.
that.
Thanks.